In 1994, a journalist asked Russ Solomon what would happen when music could be beamed directly into people's homes. Solomon smiled. He told the reporter that CD corrections would be around for a long time. 10 years later, Tower Records filed for bankruptcy. By 2006, the yellow bags were gone and the shelves were empty. One of the most successful retail empires in American history had simply ceased to exist. Solomon's empire began in 1960. He was a high school dropout selling vital records on consignment out of his father's pharmacy in Sacramento. The store took its name from the building it occupied, the Tower Theater. At the time, record stores were cold and transactional. Solomon changed that by hiring music obsessives and staying open late into the night. He wanted the store to be a neighborhood hub where the experience of browsing was the primary draw. Solomon built the store around a shared musical identity. This immersive approach turned a single drugstore rack into a blueprint for a cultural phenomenon. In 1968, Tower expanded into San Francisco. They opened a 6,000-square-foot store right as the counterculture movement exploded, making Tower the center of the local music scene. These locations became cultural landmarks, where fans and famous musicians shopped side by side. Icons like Elton John became regulars, spending hours browsing the aisles. Bruce Springsteen later remarked that if you were a musician coming into a new town, you went to Tower Records. Aggressive growth followed throughout the 80s and 90s. Tower opened massive megastores across 30 countries, establishing a presence in major hubs like London's Piccadilly Circus and massive locations like Shibuya in Tokyo. By 1999, at the height of the CD era, Tower Records was generating over $1 billion in annual sales, but the expansion was funded by credit rather than equity. While the company celebrated $1 billion in revenue, it was also carrying a hidden burden, $110 million in debt with an inflexible payment schedule. The first threat came from big box retailers like Walmart and Best Buy. They began selling the year's most popular CDs at a loss, using them as cheap bait to pull customers into stores for appliances and furniture. Tower had no other products to offset those losses. To match Walmart's prices, Tower would have to sacrifice the profit margins required to keep its massive stores running. The debt load made this price war impossible to win. Without any financial slack, Tower had to maintain high cash flow just to meet its interest payments, leaving the company with no room to negotiate or lower prices. Then, in June 1999, Napster launched. Peer-to-peer file sharing allowed millions of people to download music for free. The industry's core product was suddenly available without a trip to a retail store. These three forces, the debt, the big box price wars, and the rise of digital sharing, arrived at the same time. Together, they created a situation that physical retail was not equipped to survive. Around 2000, Russ Solomon's health began to fail, and he stepped back from daily operations. His son, Michael, took over a company that was already drowning in debt, just as the entire revenue model for recorded music began to collapse. Even as CD sales fell, Tower's new leadership doubled down on the old model. They borrowed more money and opened more stores, believing that the physical browsing experience would eventually win out. They made a desperate bet on DVDs, dedicating massive amounts of floor space to the format. This commitment of capital happened just as Netflix and digital downloads were preparing to make physical discs obsolete. Leadership watched their competitors file for bankruptcy and mistook the industry's death rattle for an opportunity. They believed that as other chains disappeared, Tower would simply inherit the remaining customers. By 2004, the company was $80 million in debt to its creditors and filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy. They closed some locations and cut costs, but they failed to develop a digital strategy. The leadership team viewed the move toward digital files as a temporary disruption to their sales. By ignoring the data and focusing on physical retail, they ensured their ultimate failure. In August 2006, the attempt to reorganize failed. Tower Records filed for Chapter 7 bankruptcy. Signaling at total liquidation, liquidators moved in and stripped the stores. Fans returned one last time, buying the last of the inventory at a 70. By October, every store in the United States was closed. The physical empire was dismantled, leaving behind nothing but millions of square feet of vacant retail space. The arrival of the internet is often cited as the sole cause of Tower's death. However, internal decisions and financial structures proved just as lethal. Leadership saw the digital threats coming, but chose to protect their cultural identity instead of adapting.
They were so committed to the idea of the megastore that they couldn't envision a future without it. Global music consumption actually grew during this period. It simply moved in a different direction. If Tower hadn't been paralyzed by debt and an obsession with its original format, it might have survived as a leaner, hybrid business. Tower Records failed because the organization remained tethered to one specific version of music retail. The company protected an outdated experience until the world moved past it, and there was nothing left to hold.